Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Rob, thank you very much for giving up your time to join us. Rob, I wanted to start by taking you back to March 2006 when you resigned from your role at Merrill Lynch. And I remember you saying at the time, one of the reasons, if not the reason for leaving Merrill's, was your dream of becoming an entrepreneur. 2 months later, I think it was May, you incorporated Redington. Can you talk to us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, well, actually, it's quite prescient because it was 15 years ago this week that Dawid, my co-founder, resigned from Merrill Lynch. Because I remember it was the then PLSA investment conference in Edinburgh, and I think he resigned on the 6th of March 2006, which is a lifetime ago. And then I actually technically retired age 27 on the 31st of March. Yeah, I mean, Dawid and I had been working together at Merrill Lynch. We had done this inaugural liability-driven investing hedge with the Friends Provident Pension Scheme in 2003. We'd advised a few companies and pension schemes on hedging their liabilities using derivatives. But over the course of 2005, it had become obvious to Dawid that to kind of affect real change, to get pension funds to understand that there was a way to manage your liability risk and close the deficit, that couldn't be done from an investment bank, because we just kept coming up against this headwind of, well, you would say that you're just investment bankers trying to sell some derivatives and make lots of money. And so what we realized is that actually what we needed to do was go and set up a consultancy to offer a different perspective to the Watts and Watts, the Mercers, the Bacon and Woodrowes, which were the kind of three dominant investment consultancy firms at the time. And so that was really the genesis of Redington. Was what if we could show pension schemes that there was a way to not just focus on your assets, but to manage your assets and liabilities and close their deficit and get your members to full funding.
So kind of many things you did at Redington. One of them was Red Start, a charity you co-founded. That was in 2012, I think. And your mission was to help essentially educate young people to budget, save, and invest. And you had this figure of working with or trying to help 1 million people. Why has that been so important for you?
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think it links back to sort of Redington, because I think maybe that was kind of the moving. I just kind of talked about moving from Merrill Lynch to Redington, but I always think of sort of 3 or 4 stages of Redington. We're probably in the 4th stage now, but stage 1 was that kind of scrappy startup, and we were literally operating out of Dawid's attic and my spare bedroom. And then 2007, we moved into these offices on Old Street, and actually on Mallow Street, which, as you know, is the name of another business we founded. And we loved it, but it's fair to say, they weren't the slickest of offices, and people were always a bit surprised when they turned up to our offices. But it was whilst we were there, I suppose, as a business, you go from a startup to you start to evolve as a business and go, how do we grow and scale from beyond just sort of Dawid and Rob, and really establish Redington as a business. And I was very lucky to work with a guy called Mike Harris. He's still a friend and mentor today. So Mike Harris founded First Direct in the 1980s. He founded Egg Bank in 1998, 1999. And he kind of sort of got me connected with this idea of building a business with a purpose beyond money. And now purpose is something that's, everyone reads on Harvard Business Review and McKinsey, and there's a sort of overused word. But in 2012 and 2013, I don't think many people were talking about it. And so I used to spend quite a lot of time with Mike and really trying to connect with what's the sort of purpose of Redington. And that's where we kind of came up with this idea of what if we could make 100 million people financially secure, which is the kind of purpose statement of Redington. And linked to that is where the idea of Red Start came out, because I think in kind of trying to look and go, what problem are we trying to solve? What's the issue here? The underlying issue is this kind of transition of financial responsibility from really the government and all the companies that people have worked for to individuals. And so the core purpose of Redington at the time, and the business has grown and it does so much more today than it did back then, was helping final salary pension schemes close their deficit, and was therefore helping people who were part of those pension schemes. But what about everyone else? And in 2012, I don't know if you remember, but that was the year of auto enrollment. And I suppose to me, that was the beginning and the beginning of the end of final salary pension funds in terms of, how people get a pension in retirement. And at the time, we were trying to figure out what our CSR strategy would be, our kind of corporate social responsibility strategy was. And I didn't want to just go and, I don't know, I wanted to do something that would be impactful. And I did quite a lot of work, and I managed to speak to a few people who basically said, look, what you don't want to do, or the most impactful thing isn't giving away your money, but is if you can give away your intellectual property, your product, your IP, that has a far greater impact. And so examples of that are Pret. They collect their sandwiches up at the end of every day. They obviously pride themselves on their fresh food, and they then deliver that to homeless centres in cities around the UK. And so they use their network of distribution to collect all their sandwiches at the end of the day, ensure they don't go to waste, and then deliver them to homeless shelters, which I think is great. Another example is IKEA. IKEA ring fence a proportion of their design and manufacturing, and so people like Médecins Sans Frontières can go to IKEA and say, can you build us flat pack hospitals, or can you build us things? So I was like, okay, well, what's the equivalent of that for Redington? And for me, it was kind of financial education, and it was that kind of aha moment where you realize that suddenly you had all these people who were going to end up in a DC pension scheme with no idea that there was this massive gap between the outcome you get under a defined contribution environment versus a defined benefit. And the word pension, doesn't really mean much to most people, and most people probably assume that they had the same pension as their mum and dad. And so kind of this kind of realization that the age of responsibility was upon us, and people are just really poor at making decisions about money, get into debt, overspend, don't have enough financial resilience. And so I suppose very much the entrepreneurs in us said, Richard Branson, screw it, just do it. We approached a local school in Islington, started going in and teaching them about, the difference between rich and poor people, those who kind of pay themselves first versus spend all their money and don't have any money left at the end of the month. And then as that got going and getting in popularity, that coincided with some research in 2013 that our money saving habits are formed at the age of 7. And really from then on, Red Start's really focused on primary school. And we've kind of got this kind of concept of earn it, keep it, grow it. And we teach it all through gamification. So we have this game called Money Matters, which we used to go into classrooms and teach. And actually over the last 12 months, because of COVID and lockdown, we've actually developed these kind of like Money Matters downloads that teachers and parents can download to do with kids in a kind of homeschooling environment.
I remember when we worked with you, you wrote a book, and I saw recently on LinkedIn that that's now being translated in Chinese and various other languages.
Yeah, so Save Your Acorns, I wrote Save Your Acorns in 2016. So I wrote it over the course of 2015 when my first daughter was born. And yeah, it's now available in Spanish, Ahorro tus pelotas. It's available in Cantonese, and it's actually being translated into German as we speak. So that's my 2021 project. And I've actually, last year I wrote a book, which I'll be publishing later this year, which is really the book's going to be called Prosperity, which is how can you transform your financial future, the future of your family, and the planet, and trying to sort of pull together this idea of helping people with their financial resilience and financial well-being. So it'll be aimed at people kind of young professionals, so kind of 28 to 45. So not straight out of, not at the beginning, but sort of 5, 6, 7 years worth of work experience, maybe thinking about buying a house, maybe thinking about starting a family. So that's very much the kind of target audience.
Just going back to savings quickly, do you think as an industry we're doing enough in the asset management world or broader financial services to educate people, or still a long way to go?
There's a massive gap to go. So there's a lady called Anna Maria Lusardi who's based at George Washington University in the US, and she's got the big 3 and big 5 financial literacy questions. And so the big 3 are, if you put £100 in the bank, and interest rates are 2%, and you put it in there for a year, how much money do you have in a year's time? 102, 100, 98, don't know. Next question is, inflation is running at 3%, and you put your money in the bank, and 2 years later you take the money out. Can you buy more, the same, less, or I don't know with your money? Third question, if you were to invest in a single stock or a mutual fund, which is a basket of stocks, which is the better sort of risk-adjusted return? Mutual fund, stock, don't know. The frightening thing is about a third of adults around the world, in Canada, in the US, in Australia, in the UK, get all three questions right. And a third of people say, I don't know to all three questions. Here's another frightening stat. 50% of all mental well-being issues in the UK, according to the Royal College of Psychologists, is linked to financial indebtedness. And a lot of the time, people who find themselves in financial indebtedness aren't the sort of people you'd expect. It's not necessarily correlated with income. It's correlated with poor decision-making around money. And again, you just need to look at the IA data, the Investment Association data in terms of flows into money. What happened this time last year? Markets sold off, people panicked, people pulled their money out of their pension funds. And that impact will massively impact people's financial future in years to come. So, I mean, I don't also think it's just the financial services industry. Yeah. If I'm honest, I think, it's government. In the US, it's really interesting. Different states have different policies on financial education, and the states that have financial education have higher levels of saving, lower levels of indebtedness, and better financial well-being. And the same as in Canada and Australia and New Zealand. Think about these things. So I think it's unfair to say it should fall on the financial services industry. If I may, I think one of the challenges I have is the language we use is not inclusive. We use very technical language. We tend to use language which is for us, by us. It's a bit like if you go to a doctor and the doctor speaks to you in kind of medical terms and you're like, I have no idea what you mean. And actually a brilliant doctor is able to explain to you something very serious and very challenging medically, but break it down in plain English. So I think one of the best things that we could do as an industry is really face into using plain English on our websites and our communications. And we really need to kind of separate the regulatory need to drown people in a kind of a PhD thesis of regulatory rubbish that no one reads, and have a very clear, concise explanation that says, if you invest in this, this is what it means. Or if you sign up to this credit card, this is what it means.
I mean, a lot of people listening today will be familiar with the Redington, and I think testament to what you and Dad achieved. It's kind of extremely well-known business. But you jumped ship to join SJP, and I was doing some research earlier, and I got some stats for you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you are responsible, your team now, for 800,000 people's investments, of which that totals just over 130 billion, of which you work with 39 fund managers who between them manage $7 trillion. Apart from that, Rob, what made you step aside from the company you co-founded to join SJP? And can you also tell us a little bit more about your role at SJP?
Yeah, well, great question. I think, like everything in life, a bit of sort of push and pull, and the push was really one of the challenges when you're an entrepreneur and you find your business is that the killer question, if you get investors, all the rest, is can this business grow and succeed without you in it? If you think about what happened with Apple when Steve Jobs died, the big question was, could Tim Cook take over, replace? And Tim Cook's been brilliant, but at the time, no one knew he was going to be brilliant. And so one of the challenges with any entrepreneurial business is, can the business, can the entity, can the organization exist beyond the founders? And Dowd and I, when we set up Redington, were very clear that the business wouldn't be about us. We avoided calling, Redington, Gardner, Kanotia Hulu, or Kanotia Hulu Gardner, because that would have sounded rubbish. And and B, we wanted to create. Dan and I are big believers in this kind of concept of being good ancestors. You think about your children and your grandchildren and then your grandchildren's children, and so we wanted to plant this kind of sapling that was Redington, that would grow into a tree that would exist and grow beyond us. And so at some point you've got to sort of set the culture and build the leadership team that it can step up and grow. So in 2016 we appointed Mitesh to be CEO of Redington, and then over the course of the last few years have been really kind of growing up as a business. Every business is a bit like going from being a teenager to adult, and we now have a proper board. We have an external chair. Catherine Purves is the chair. So what became clear to me, and I remember it was our 10th birthday when Darren and I decided this, is you've either got to say, well, we're going to stay in it and do another 10 years, or we need to plan and transition a way out. So it was our 10th birthday. We were like,
okay. That was in Hyde Park, wasn't it? The party in Hyde Park?
It was the party in Hyde Park, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was when Darren and I. So that would have been 2016, and that's when we kind of figured out we needed to make that transition, and we began it with the search for CEO and the appointment of Mitesh, and then all of the things that have gone on from there. As you know, I'm still a shareholder. Darren's still a shareholder. I still sit on the board. I still care a lot about Redington and the impact it has as a business, and likewise, I also founded a company called Mallow Street, and I sit on the board of Mallow Street. And so, as board directors, Dad and I have to think about that. I also wanted to challenge myself, and I suppose the opportunity of SJP is exactly as you said. When I joined, it was 96 billion. It's now 130 billion in 5 years' time. I mean, in 2020, which was a really tough year, we grew 14 billion pounds. We helped 800,000 people save 14 billion pounds for their future. And the bit that I'm responsible for will be 250 billion in the next 4 years. And by the end of the decade, will be 500 billion pounds. And here's what you didn't say is that 7 trillion of assets gets invested across 70 trillion pounds worth of equities and bonds around the world. And so as a business, I think we have real leverage to be a force for good. And that's what attracted me to SJP. This ability that it has this brilliant advice business from Cornwall to Aberdeen, up and down the country, helping those 800,000 clients. Literally, we've got clients who are less than 1 year old, and we've actually got a few hundred clients who are over 100. So we've got the full 100-year life, and we'll be over 1 million clients in the next few years. And was, how could we have a real difference? And I had a yearning to get closer to the end client, because, when you're at Redington, you'd advise pension funds, whether it's Aviva or BP or PwC or Unilever, but you're advising the trustees. You never, I don't feel like I'm advising you, Jamie. I don't, that you don't have that sort of direct feedback.
Yeah.
Whereas, this morning I had a call with a client and a partner, and that you're having a big, you're having a big impact on people's lives. I think the other thing is I wanted to challenge myself and see, Dad and I had built Redington and built a culture up from scratch, from nothing. What I wanted to see is could to what extent could culture and be used and brought in and operating a business the size of SJP, which is huge. We've got 4,000 advisors. They have 3,000 support staff. We've got over 2,000 employees. So that's a big company. And could I, to what extent could we have a big impact there? And I think we've, I've been there 2 years, and I think we've made a huge progress, especially around sort of responsible investing and ESG and this idea of sort of making money a force for good.
Yeah, you mentioned then obviously speaking to clients. Tell us a little bit more about kind of what you're doing on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis in your role.
I mean, at a macro level, there's really 3 things that I need to do. One is the kind of culture of the team, and our sort of team purpose is financial well-being in a world worth living in. So my job is really to sort of set the context for that. And it doesn't matter whether you're an investment analyst, investment ops, investment communications, investment change. The second thing was around investment governance, and we made some huge changes in our investment governance last year, and we spent a lot of time in 2019 mapping that out. 2020 was about implementing it. But as you say, look, with 39 funds, 69 different sub-strategies, 4,000 underlying securities, the way we were operating was the way that we were operating 10 years ago when we were just 20 billion pounds and 20 fund managers. And so I wanted to bring in proper institutional investment governance. The third thing is really about data and analytics. And again, spent the first 2 years really trying to integrate all of our data, working with MSCI, with FTSE, with Aladdin, with State Street, create a single source of data, ESG, building our own ESG tools, and to have live data, at our fingertips. So, I mean, those three things are quite simple to say, but they're bloody hard to do.
Yeah.
Underneath that was then sort of, redoing all our investment beliefs. We, SJP had been doing ESG since 2014, but it was on the side. And what we wanted to do was integrate it into our investment beliefs and have real teeth, so that we could engage with our fund managers. A year ago, we committed to have 100% of our fund managers signed up to the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investing. And we achieved that last year. So we engaged with a number of fund managers who wouldn't have otherwise signed up. And that for us is a non-negotiable. 63% of our fund managers are rated A+. There's no such thing as a non-ESG fund. With ESG is at the heart of everything that we do. And then last year, we also signed up to the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, which means that we're coming up with our plans to get to net zero by 2050 and on our investments, but also to reduce our carbon footprint and align with the Paris Climate Accord by 15 to 30% over the next 5 years. And then really, there's a huge amount of education and engagement with the partnership, with the clients. How is this? It's fair to say that the kind of retail world is probably running 3 to 5 years behind the institutional world. So all the conversations that we were having with clients on ESG and responsible investment until 2016, 2017 are the conversations that we're having today with advisors and partners. But like anyone in that kind of job, recruit the right people, build the right team, make sure you've got the right data and system and processes, and then get out of the way and let your team do the rest.
Yeah, you mentioned ESG quite a few times there, and we've seen so many fund launches and strategy launches of late. I mean, is this, in your view, positive for investors in society, or do you think there's still some red flags from those funds that are being launched and the groups that are pretending to integrate and deliver ESG strategies for their clients?
Well, I think it is positive because we need the reality is we're running out of time and we need to move quickly, and it's not just sort of climate change, it's biodiversity, it's a whole host of things. But that doesn't mean that people aren't jumping on the bandwagon. And if I had £1 for every firm I met with who wants to talk to us about ESG or all the rest, and then you're like, but what? Let me speak to your CEO, or what are you doing at the top? Is this just an opportunistic fund launch, or is this something that you cut your company in half and you can see it? So one of our fund managers is Impacts. These guys have been doing that for over 20 years. You can tell the difference between a company that authentically walks the walk versus one that has opportunistically jumped on a bandwagon. Nonetheless, we need to shift from this kind of Milton Friedman profit, the sole purpose of a company is profit, to this much more balanced profit is good, creates jobs, it creates economic growth, but we need to be mindful about what impact that has on people and the planet. And if companies like Exxon are creating $39 billion of environmental damage every year, and they don't want to face into it and don't want to deal with that, then we need to do that. And I think the conversation we have with clients is that ESG is not ethical investing. I mean, a lot of the time is just trying to explain what is responsible investing, what is ESG integration, how's that different from ethical, and explain that at the heart of this, it is about making businesses better. If we, Coca-Cola have reduced the amount of sugar they use in their products by 50% over the last 10 years. Levi Strauss have reduced the amount of water they use in the manufacture of a pair of jeans by 96% over the last decades. Molson Coors have reduced the amount of water they use to make beer. Actually, all these things are not only are they good for the environment, they're actually good for business, because actually wasting a lot of water to make a pair of jeans is also good, is not good for the bottom line. And also what it means is that a product is more relevant for a consumer. So these things, to me, these things are win-win. And I mean, there's some really good research done by MSCI at the start of the year, just showing that companies that have strong ESG credentials, can have demonstrated kind of superior, revenue and EBITDA growth over the long term. And that's what you need to do, is create this kind of sustainable flywheel of economic growth, of profitable growth. These are good things, but one which is also mindful about the impact it has on the planet and people as well. I mean, the kind of social consequences of businesses really came to the fore last year.
Lastly, if we look at our industry, financial services, what, in your view, is the kind of next biggest issue that financial services has to contend with?
Well, I think there are a number. There's been a lot of talk about inclusion and diversity, and I'm conscious that we're two white men talking here. As an industry, I was reflecting on this, that when I started working with Dawid I first met him 18 years ago. As an industry, we haven't really moved on much further in terms of building an inclusive and diverse workforce. And I think so all of us collectively need to kind of create a talent map to ensure that we recruit a broader group of people into our industry, and also help take out the kind of kinks in the hose that exist, whether you're a woman or whether you're the background you come from, or your race. We need to find a better way of doing that, and I think we're all more aware of it, and I think we all kind of understand that we need to do it. The separate thing is actually taking action and doing something about it. So I think we need to face into that, and I hope that 15 years from now we have made progress. Look, the biggie for me is this whole net zero, TCFD reporting. And it's not just climate change. I think, at some point we need to face into the fact that we put enormous value on, cryptocurrencies and all the rest. But at what point are we going to put value on the life of a whale, or the life of an elephant, or the soil that we have? There is so much opportunity. What if we thought about putting true value on the biodiversity of the planet, which there is just countless intellectual property locked up in the natural world? What if we applied our kind of financial know-how to unlock value that exists in our ecosystem, true financial value that exists in our ecosystems, and create a truly win-win world? So I think if we could figure that out collectively as an industry, that would be a game changer.
Well, Rob, bang on 3 o'clock. I know you only had half an hour for your next meeting, but listen, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who's dialed in and joined us, and have a nice afternoon. Thanks again for your time, Rob.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me on, Jimmy.
Cheers, pleasure. Thanks, Rob.
Okay, bye.
Bye.